She stood on my porch at 6 in the morning, clipboard in hand, measuring tape around her neck like some demented fashion statement, screaming that my entire ranch was an illegal eyesore that needed to be demolished within 24 hours. The woman's voice could strip paint off a barn door, and her cheap polyester blazer screamed discount rack desperation. What she didn't know, what would soon turn her world upside down, was that I owned not just this ranch, but every single square inch of land her precious HOA sat on. I'm talking about the whole development, all 347 houses, the community center where she held her little power trip meetings, even the fountain she loved posing next to for her Facebook photos. Every last blade of grass was mine, and this discount store dictator was about to learn what happens when you threaten to demolish your landlord's home. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and I'd been living peacefully on my 40-acre ranch for the past 3 years, raising horses and minding my own business after retiring from 25 years as an IRS criminal investigation special agent. Yeah, the kind who put handcuffs on CEOs cooking their books and tracked down shell companies hiding millions in offshore accounts. After decades of dealing with white-collar criminals in $1,000 suits, all I wanted was peace, quiet, and the occasional whinny from my horses. Instead, I got Brenda Hutchinson, self-appointed queen of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, standing on my property at dawn like some kind of suburban conquistador. "Sir, I don't think you understand the severity of this situation," she shrieked, waving her clipboard like it was handed down from Mount Sinai. "This entire structure violates 17 different HOA regulations. The color is wrong. The fence height exceeds maximum allowances by 3.7 inches, and don't even get me started on those animals." She pointed at my horses like they were radioactive waste. Her face had turned an impressive shade of purple, clashing magnificently with her orange spray tan. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the Colombian dark roast while watching her flip-flops slap against my handcrafted cedar deck. The woman had driven up my private road, past 3 different no trespassing signs, ignored my locked gate, which she'd somehow opened, and now stood here declaring war on my family's 100-year-old ranch. The same ranch my grandfather had built with his bare hands after returning from World War II. The same land that had been in our family since before this woman's precious HOA was even a gleam in some developer's eye. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the urge to laugh at the absurdity. "This property isn't part of any OA. Never has been, never will be. You might want to check your maps again." But Brenda wasn't interested in facts or reality. She thrust a piece of paper at me, some official-looking document with more stamps than a passport. "This is a formal notice of violation and immediate demolition order. You have exactly 24 hours to begin dismantling these illegal structures or face legal action." The document was impressive in its stupidity. Someone had clearly spent hours making it look official, complete with fake statute numbers and made-up ordinances. The letterhead read, "Willowbrook Estates Community Standards Enforcement Division," which sounded about as real as a $3 bill. I'd seen better forgeries from teenagers trying to buy beer, but what caught my attention wasn't the laughable attempt at legal intimidation. It was the signature at the bottom, Brenda Hutchinson, President, Willowbrook Estates HOA, with what looked like a notary stamp that I'd bet my best horse was faker than her Louis Vuitton knockoff purse. "You seem very confident about your authority here," I observed, folding the paper and tucking it into my pocket. Evidence was evidence, even the ridiculous kind. "Tell me, how long have you been president of this hoe?" She puffed up like a peacock protecting its territory. 7 years of dedicated service to this community. I've personally overseen the removal of 16 non-compliant structures and brought property values up by 23%. Translation: she'd spent 7 years terrorizing her neighbors and forcing them to conform to her twisted vision of suburban perfection. I'd dealt with her type before, people who grabbed whatever tiny bit of power they could find and wielded it like a medieval mace. The difference was, the criminals I used to investigate at least knew they were criminals. Brenda genuinely believed she was some kind of suburban superhero, protecting property values one demolished shed at a time. "And in those 7 years," I asked casually, "did you ever actually check who owns the land your HOA is built on?" She blinked at me like I'd started speaking ancient Sumerian. "What kind of ridiculous question is that? The homeowners own their properties, obviously. That's how property works." Oh, sweet summer child. If only she knew how property actually worked, especially when it came to master-planned communities built on leased land. I could have told her right then, could have dropped the bomb that would shatter her little kingdom into a million pieces. But where was the fun in that? No. Someone who shows up at dawn, threatening to demolish a man's home, deserves a more memorable lesson. Plus, I needed to see how deep this rabbit hole went. 7 years was a long time to play dictator, and I had a feeling Brenda had been very busy during her reign of terror. You know what? I said, giving her my best confused homeowner smile. You're absolutely right. I should probably talk to a lawyer about this. 24 hours, you said? She practically glowed with self-satisfaction. 24 hours, not a minute more, and I'll be back with the county inspector and law enforcement if necessary. With that, she spun on her discount heels and marched back to her car, a beige minivan with a Willowbrook Estates HOA magnetic sign slapped on the side, professional. As her taillights disappeared down my driveway, I pulled out my phone and made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Miranda? Yeah, it's Marcus. Remember that favor you owe me from the Pennington case? I'm calling it in. How fast can you pull property records for Willowbrook Estates? Every single lot, especially the master deed. Miranda Chen was the best property rights attorney in 3 states and had the personality of a honey badger when it came to protecting her clients. We'd worked together on several cases where white-collar criminals had tried to hide assets through complex property schemes. Willowbrook Estates, she repeated, and I could hear her fingers flying across a keyboard. That's the development next to your ranch, right? Give me 30 minutes. What am I looking for? I grinned at my horses, who were watching the whole drama with the kind of mild interest they usually reserved for apple treats. I want to know exactly what kind of lease agreement those 347 homeowners signed. And Miranda? Pull everything on someone named Brenda Hutchinson, 7-year HOA president with delusions of grandeur. While Miranda worked her magic, I decided to do some investigating of my own. The Willowbrook Estates community was just a 10-minute drive from my ranch, close enough that I could see their ridiculous entrance fountain from my east pasture. I'd never paid much attention to it before, content to let them live their suburban dreams while I enjoyed my rural peace. But now I was curious about what exactly Brenda had been up to for 7 years. The entrance to Willowbrook Estates was exactly what you'd expect from a mid-tier suburban development. Brick columns, brass letters, and that fountain Brenda loved so much. What most people didn't notice was the small bronze plaque set into one of the columns. Built on land leased from Sullivan Family Trust, 1998, 25 years ago, right around the time my father was looking to generate some passive income from our excess acreage. He'd been smart about it too, keeping ownership while letting developers build their cookie-cutter paradise. I parked across the street and watched the morning routine of Willowbrook Estates, joggers in matching athletic wear, moms with strollers that cost more than some cars, and the occasional dog walker trying to avoid the HOA-approved pet waste stations. Everything was beige, from the houses to the mailboxes to the cars in the driveways. It was like someone had dipped the entire neighborhood in oatmeal and called it elegant. My phone buzzed, Miranda calling back earlier than expected. Marcus, you beautiful bastard. Please tell me someone is giving you trouble over there. Her voice had that particular tone that meant she'd found something interesting. Why don't you tell me what you found first? I suggested, already knowing this was going to be good. Your father was a genius, she began. The master lease agreement for Willowbrook Estates includes a clause I've never seen before. Not only does the Sullivan Family Trust retain ownership of all land, but there's a provision that allows the landowner to terminate any HOA authority with 30 days' notice if the HOA engages in, quote, activities detrimental to the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties. Marcus, your ranch is specifically listed as a neighboring property that must be protected from HOA interference. I nearly choked on my coffee. My father, God rest his soul, had basically written in a kill switch for any HOA that got too big for its britches, and Brenda had just activated it by threatening my ranch. What about our dear HOA president, I asked, already savoring what was coming. Oh, this is where it gets fun, Miranda continued. Brenda Hutchinson has been a very busy woman. In 7 years, she's issued over 400 violations, collected nearly $200,000 in fines. And, here's the kicker, she's been paying herself a salary of $75,000 a year from HOA funds. The original bylaws cap president compensation at $5,000 annually. Embezzlement. Of course, It wasn't enough to be a petty tyrant. She had to be a greedy one too. How much do you want to bet those financial records have never been properly audited? I mused. No bet, Miranda laughed. I already checked. She's been filing the reports herself, claiming she has an accounting background. Spoiler alert, she was a part-time bookkeeper at a pet store for 6 months in 2015. This was better than Christmas morning. Not only was Brenda operating outside her authority, she was stealing from the very people she claimed to protect. Miranda, I need you to pull together everything. Financial records, violation histories, the works, and draft me a nice letter exercising that termination clause. I paused, struck by a thought. Actually, make it an eviction notice. If she wants to play with legal documents, let's show her what real ones look like. With pleasure, Miranda purred. When do you want to serve it? I thought about Brenda's 24-hour ultimatum and smiled. She's coming back tomorrow at 6 a.m. with reinforcements. Think you can have everything ready by 5:45? Miranda's laugh was pure evil. Marcus, for this, I'll hand-deliver it myself in a process server costume. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and document reviews. Miranda had opened a beautiful can of worms, and the more we dug, the more we found. Brenda hadn't just been embezzling and harassing. She'd been running the HOA like her personal kingdom. Residents who questioned her were hit with massive fine increases. Board members who opposed her mysteriously resigned after their homes were subjected to daily inspections. One poor family had been fined $3,000 for having their garbage cans visible from the street for an extra hour. But the best discovery came from an unexpected source. Around 3 in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. Not many people knew where my doorbell was. Considering it was a half-mile drive from the main road, I opened the door to find a nervous-looking man in his 60s, wearing a polo shirt that had seen better days, and clutching a manila folder like it contained nuclear codes. "Mr. Sullivan?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder as if Brenda might materialize from thin air. "My name is Harold Peterson. I used to be on the HOA board until Brenda forced me out. I heard about what happened this morning." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I've been keeping records. Everything she's done, every illegal fine, every forged document. I was waiting for someone with the power to stop her." I invited Harold in, poured him some coffee, and listened to a tale of suburban tyranny that would make dictators jealous. Brenda had systematically destroyed anyone who challenged her, using the HOA's power to make their lives miserable until they either submitted or moved away. She'd even forced one board member to sell his house at a loss after hitting him with $17,000 in accumulated fines for grass that was half an inch too tall. "The worst part," Harold said, his hands shaking slightly, "is that she's planning to expand. She's been talking about annexing your ranch into the HOA territory. Claims it's an eyesore that affects property values. She's already had fake surveys done showing your land as part of the original development." He pulled out a document from his folder, a poorly photoshopped map that indeed showed my ranch as Lot 348 of Willowbrook Estates. I studied the fake map, noting the amateur job on the boundaries and the fact that they'd spelled my name wrong on the property label. "Harold, would you be willing to testify about all this? Maybe talk to some other residents who've been affected?" His face lit up like I'd just offered him a winning lottery ticket. "Mr. Sullivan, I've been waiting 7 years for someone to ask me that question. I've got a list of 43 families who want her gone but are too scared to act." Perfect. Not only was I going to shut down Brenda's reign of terror, I was going to do it with an audience of her victims. "Harold, I want you to quietly spread the word. Tomorrow morning at 6, everyone should be watching their windows. They're going to want to see this." After Harold left, clutching my phone number and looking more hopeful than he probably had in years, I called Miranda with an update. She was practically cackling with glee as I described the fake annexation plans. She actually tried to forge property lines? "Oh, this is going from civil to criminal real fast. I'm adding fraud charges to our list of fun surprises for tomorrow." That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My horses grazed peacefully in the pasture, blissfully unaware that their home had been threatened by a suburban Napoleon in knockoff designer shoes. I raised my beer in a toast to my father, who'd apparently seen this coming decades ago. The man had always been 3 steps ahead, even from beyond the grave. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. "Everything's ready. Documents printed, sealed, and gorgeous." Brenda's about to learn why you don't mess with property lawyers or IRS investigators. See you at dawn. I smiled, already imagining Brenda's face when she realized she'd threatened to demolish her landlord's home. The woman who'd spent 7 years building her little empire was about to watch it crumble in less than 7 minutes. That night, I barely slept. Not from worry, but from anticipation. It's not every day you get to deliver such poetic justice. I was up at 4, coffee brewing. Documents spread across my kitchen table for one final review. Miranda had outdone herself. The termination notice was a thing of beauty, citing specific lease violations, documented financial fraud, and abuse of authority. The eviction notice was even better, giving Brenda 30 days to vacate her home since she'd violated the lease terms every homeowner had signed. By 5:30, I was showered, dressed in my best casual intimidation outfit, jeans that fit just right, boots that meant business, and a button-down that said, "I'm reasonable, but don't test me." Miranda arrived at 5:40, looking like she'd stepped out of a law firm catalog. She'd even brought a briefcase that probably cost more than Brenda's entire blazer collection. "Ready for the show?" she asked, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Ready? I've been ready since she set foot on my porch yesterday." We positioned ourselves strategically. Me on the porch with my coffee, Miranda slightly to the side with her briefcase of doom. The morning was perfect. Clear sky, birds singing, and just enough of a breeze to make dramatic paper waving possible. At exactly 6 a.m., like clockwork, a convoy pulled up my driveway. Brenda's beige minivan led the charge, followed by a pickup truck with county code enforcement on the side. 2 more cars with what looked like HOA board members. And surprisingly, a local news van. Apparently, Brenda had decided to make my humiliation public. Oh, the irony was delicious. She emerged from her minivan like a general preparing for battle, clipboard in hand, wearing a blazer that was somehow even cheaper looking than yesterday's. The woman from the news van immediately shoved a microphone in her face, and Brenda lit up like a Christmas tree. "We're here today to take action against a property that has been dragging down our community values for too long," she announced to the camera. "This is what happens when people refuse to comply with reasonable community standards." The code enforcement officer looked less enthusiastic, probably wondering why he'd been dragged out here at dawn for something that clearly wasn't his jurisdiction. The HOA board members huddled together like sheep, sensing a wolf nearby. I let them all gather, let Brenda position everyone for maximum dramatic effect. Then I stood up, coffee mug in hand, and smiled. "Good morning, everyone. Beautiful day for some property education, isn't it?" Brenda's face twisted into what she probably thought was an authoritative expression. "Mr. Sullivan, I hope you've come to your senses. These officers are here to ensure you comply with the demolition order. We've given you more than enough time." "Actually," I said, taking a casual sip of coffee, "I've been using that time to do some research. Fascinating stuff, really. Miranda, would you like to share what we've discovered?" Miranda stepped forward, every inch the legal predator. "Certainly, Miss Hutchinson. Are you aware that Willowbrook Estates is built entirely on land leased from the Sullivan Family Trust?" The silence was beautiful. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish discovering air. The news camera swung between us, the reporter's eyes lighting up as she sensed the story, taking a very different turn. That's ridiculous," Brenda finally sputtered. "The homeowners own their properties. They own the structures," Miranda clarified patiently, as if explaining to a child. "But the land underneath? Every square inch belongs to Mr. Sullivan here. Your house, the community center, that fountain you love so much, all sitting on Sullivan land, and according to the master lease agreement your HOA operates under, Mr. Sullivan has some very interesting rights." I pulled out the termination notice, making sure the camera could see the official seals. "This is a formal notice of termination of HOA authority over Willowbrook Estates, effective immediately. Your HOA no longer has any power to issue fines, enforce regulations, or, and this is my favorite part, threaten neighboring properties with demolition." Brenda's face went through a rainbow of colors, from red to purple to a kind of greenish white that really brought out the orange in her spray tan. "You can't do that. I'm the president. I have authority." She was actually stamping her foot like a toddler denied candy. The news reporter was practically vibrating with excitement. "About that," Miranda interjected smoothly, We've also discovered some interesting discrepancies in the HOA financial records. Miss Hutchinson, can you explain why you've been paying yourself 15 times the authorized salary? Or why $200,000 in collected fines seem to have disappeared into your personal accounts? The code enforcement officer took a large step back, suddenly very interested in studying his clipboard. The HOA board members looked like they'd just discovered they were standing next to a live grenade. But Brenda, bless her delusional heart, doubled down. Those are lies. I've done nothing but improve this community. You're just a bitter old man who can't stand progress. She spun toward the camera, going for broke. This is what happens when outsiders try to destroy our way of life. This man is trying to ruin everything we've built. Built on my land, I reminded her cheerfully. Which brings me to this second document. I produced the eviction notice with a flourish that would have made a magician proud. Brenda Hutchinson, you are hereby given notice to vacate the premises at 457 Willowbrook Lane within 30 days. Your lease is terminated due to multiple violations including fraud, embezzlement, and harassment of the landowner. That's when Brenda completely lost it. The professional facade cracked like an egg, and 7 years of built-up entitlement came pouring out. You can't evict me from my own home. I am the HOA. I am the authority here. She actually threw her clipboard, which sailed past my head and landed in my flower bed. The news camera caught every beautiful second. Ma'am, the code enforcement officer finally spoke up. I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. But Brenda was beyond calm. She lunged toward me, apparently deciding that physical assault was the answer to her problems. Miranda stepped smoothly between us, briefcase raised like a shield. Miss Hutchinson, I strongly advise against adding assault charges to your growing list of legal problems. That's when we heard the sirens. Apparently, someone, probably Harold, had called 911 when the convoy arrived. 2 police cars pulled up, and I recognized one of the officers. Detective James Morrison had worked with me on several federal cases back in the day. His eyes took in the scene, the furious woman being held back by terrified HOA board members, the news camera recording everything, and me standing calmly on my porch with a coffee mug. Marcus, he said with barely concealed amusement, why do I get the feeling this is going to generate a lot of paperwork? I shrugged innocently. Morning, James. Just exercising my property rights. Miss Hutchinson here seems upset about discovering she's been my tenant for the past 7 years. Brenda broke free from the board members and rushed toward Detective Morrison. Arrest him. He's stealing our homes. He's destroying our community. Morrison looked at her, then at me. Then, at the official documents, Miranda was helpfully holding up, Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back and explain calmly what's happening here. But Brenda was beyond calm explanations. She went on a tirade that included accusations of conspiracy, threats of lawsuits, and some very creative profanity that made the news reporter motion frantically for her cameraman to keep rolling. The phrase, "I'll destroy you," featured prominently, along with some physical gestures that probably weren't suitable for morning television. It took another 20 minutes to sort everything out. The code enforcement officer confirmed he had no jurisdiction over my property and apologized for the confusion. The HOA board members discovered a sudden urgent need to be anywhere else. The news reporter got enough footage for a week's worth of segments, and Brenda? Well, Brenda got a ride in the back of a police car after she tried to kick Detective Morrison in what she apparently thought was self-defense. As the circus departed, leaving only Miranda and me on the porch, I finally allowed myself to laugh. Really laugh. The kind that comes from deep in your belly and makes your ribs hurt. Miranda joined in, both of us probably looking slightly unhinged to any passing observers. That was even better than I imagined, she gasped between giggles. Did you see her face when she realized she'd been paying you rent while trying to demolish your house? I wiped tears from my eyes. The foot stamping was my favorite part. Very professional, very presidential. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Brenda's regime. By noon, the video had gone viral on local social media. HOA president discovers she's been tenant all along, became the most shared post in county history. By evening, 43 families had contacted Miranda about recovering illegally collected fines. By the next morning, forensic accountants were combing through 7 years of HOA financial records. Brenda was released on bail, but wisely decided to lay low. Her resignation letter arrived within 48 hours, a terse document that claimed she was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. The opportunities apparently included hiring a criminal defense attorney and trying to negotiate a plea deal for the embezzlement charges. The Willowbrook Estates community held an emergency meeting that week. Without Brenda's iron fist, people actually talked to each other. They discovered that nobody liked the beige-only color scheme, nobody wanted to measure grass with a ruler, and absolutely everybody wanted their money back. Harold Peterson was elected interim president by unanimous vote. His first act was to suspend all aesthetic regulations, pending a complete review. I attended that meeting, sitting in the back like a benevolent landlord. Ghost. When it came time for public comment, I stood up and made an offer. I'm willing to continue the current lease arrangement with one modification. The HOA can exist to manage common areas and community events, but it will have no authority to issue fines or enforce aesthetic regulations on individual properties. Also, I want quarterly financial audits by an independent firm. Take it or leave it. They took it. Unanimously. With applause. The news coverage continued for weeks. Brenda became the poster child for HOA overreach. Her meltdown replayed endlessly as a cautionary tale. Legal experts debated the unusual lease arrangement on morning shows. Property rights advocates held me up as a hero. I turned down most interview requests, content to let the video speak for itself. 3 months later, I was back to my quiet life. The horses didn't care about viral videos or legal victories. They just wanted their morning oats and afternoon runs. The ranch looked exactly the same as it had before Brenda's visit. Still the wrong color by HOA standards. Still peaceful. Still mine. Harold stopped by occasionally with updates. The community had voted to repaint the entrance fountain. House colors were blooming across Willowbrook Estates like flowers after rain. Blues and greens and even a daring red. The crime rate hadn't increased. Property values hadn't plummeted. Turns out, people were perfectly capable of maintaining their homes without a suburban dictator measuring their grass. Brenda's house, the one at 457 Willowbrook Lane, sold quickly. The new owners were a young couple who painted it a cheerful yellow and planted wildflowers in the front yard. They had no idea about the property's history, and I saw no reason to tell them. Fresh starts all around. Miranda and I became regular coffee buddies, meeting monthly to laugh about the case and plan our next collaboration. She'd framed the eviction notice in her office, calling it the most satisfying document I've ever drafted. I had to agree, though I'd kept the original demolition order. Sometimes on quiet mornings, I'd look at it and chuckle. The story should have ended there, with peace and freedom and horses grazing in non-compliant pastures, but life, especially life involving people like Brenda Hutchinson, rarely wraps up that neatly. 2 years after her spectacular downfall and exodus to Florida, I received a phone call that proved some people never learn their lessons. They just find new places to repeat their mistakes. Marcus, you're going to want to sit down for this. Miranda's voice came through the phone with that particular tone that meant either very good news or very bad news. It was 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I was enjoying my ritualistic coffee on the porch when her call interrupted the peaceful sounds of morning birds and neighing horses. Let me guess, I said, already sensing where this was going. Our friend Brenda has been busy in the Sunshine State? Miranda's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Oh, she's been busy all right. But here's the twist. She's not trying to take over another HOA. She's formed a consulting company called Community Standards Solutions. And guess which community she's targeting as her first client? My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. She wouldn't dare. But even as I said it, I knew she would. Brenda Hutchinson had spent 2 years nursing her wounds and plotting her return. The woman who'd tried to demolish my ranch was attempting a comeback tour. And apparently, she thought Willowbrook Estates had forgotten her spectacular meltdown. She's been contacting individual homeowners, Miranda continued, offering to help them restore property values and return to proven community standards. She's actually pitching herself as a victim of a hostile takeover who was forced out by, and I quote, outside influences who don't understand community values. I set my mug down carefully, feeling that familiar sensation of a chess game beginning. How many people has she contacted? The pause before Miranda's answer told me everything I needed to know, at least 15 that we know of. Mostly newer residents who moved in after her departure, people who don't know the full story. This was classic Brenda, rewriting history to cast herself as the hero. She'd waited just long enough for memories to fade and new faces to appear, like a virus that had been dormant, waiting for the immune system to weaken before striking again. But what she didn't realize was that Willowbrook Estates had developed antibodies to her particular brand of infection. Miranda, I need you to pull everything we have from the original case, every document, every video clip, every piece of evidence, and set up a meeting with Harold and the current HOA board. I stood up, already feeling the old investigative instincts kicking in. If Brenda wants round two, she's going to discover that we've been preparing for her return since the day she left. The meeting was held that evening in the Willowbrook Estates Community Center, the same room where Brenda had once held court like a suburban empress. Now it was decorated with children's artwork, photos from community events, and a banner reading "Neighbors Helping Neighbors" that would have given the old Brenda hives. Harold Peterson sat at the head of the table, flanked by the new board members who'd been elected in the wake of Brenda's regime. She's been particularly targeting the new development on Maple Court, Harold explained, spreading out a map marked with red X's showing homes Brenda had contacted, 12 houses, all purchased within the last 18 months. She's telling them that property values have dropped 15% since her departure. Have they? Asked Janet Wu, the current HOA president who'd replaced Harold. She was a pediatrician who ran the board meetings with the same efficient care she used to treat sick children. Harold shook his head. Property values are up 22%. We checked with 3 independent real estate firms. The market loves what we've become, a community that lets people actually live their lives. I studied the map, noting Brenda's strategic approach. She was targeting the newest, most expensive section of Willowbrook Estates. People who'd paid premium prices and might be susceptible to fear-mongering about property values. Classic manipulation tactics. Find the pressure point and squeeze. What exactly is she proposing? I asked. Though I could already guess, Janet pulled out a glossy brochure that made me laugh out loud. Community Standard Solutions. Restoring excellence one neighborhood at a time. The photo of Brenda on the cover had been professionally edited to remove about 10 years and several rage lines. She was posed in front of a generic McMansion, arms crossed in what she probably thought was a power stance, but looked more like constipation. She's offering a comprehensive package. Janet read from the brochure, her voice dripping with disdain. Assessment of current standard violations, development of enforcement protocols, training for board members on proper compliance procedures, and ongoing consultation services. Starting price, $15,000 plus monthly retainer. The room erupted in bitter laughter. Mike Chen, the treasurer who'd spent months untangling Brenda's financial mess, slammed his hand on the table. She stole $200,000 from us and now wants us to pay her to come back? The woman has balls of steel and brains of pudding. But I wasn't laughing anymore. I recognized this pattern from my IRS days. Criminals who got caught often tried to reinvent themselves as consultants, teaching others how to avoid the mistakes that got them caught. It was audacious, stupid, and occasionally successful if people didn't know the full story. We need to act fast, I said, standing up to pace the room. Every day she spends spreading her poison is another chance for her to gain a foothold. Here's what we're going to do. I outlined a plan that would not only stop Brenda's comeback but ensure she never tried again. First, we needed to educate the new residents. Harold volunteered to organize a History of Willowbrook Estates presentation, complete with video highlights of Brenda's meltdown and the forensic accounting reports showing her embezzlement. I'll make it a social event, he suggested. Barbecue in the park, family-friendly, with a short presentation on how we became the community we are today. Second, Miranda would send a cease and desist letter to Brenda's consulting company. She's banned from HOA leadership for life as part of her plea deal, Miranda noted. Offering consulting services to HOAs could be considered a violation of that agreement. I'll make sure her probation officer knows what she's up to. Third, and this was my favorite part, we'd create our own marketing campaign. Willowbrook Estates, free to be a community, would showcase the transformation from Brenda's beige prison to today's vibrant neighborhood. Before and after photos, testimonials from happy residents, and maybe a few strategic reminders about what happens to people who try to impose unwanted authority on the community. The barbecue was scheduled for the following Saturday. Word spread quickly, and not just among Willowbrook residents. The local news station that had covered the original confrontation got wind of Brenda's return attempt and asked to attend. I was initially hesitant, but Janet made a good point. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. Let's show everyone what we've built without her. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and just enough breeze to carry the smell of grilling burgers throughout the neighborhood. The park was transformed into a celebration of everything Brenda had tried to suppress. Children ran freely across grass that no one measured. Dogs played in a specially designated area that would have sent the old regime into convulsions. And the newest feature, a community art wall where residents could paint whatever they wanted, stood as a colorful rebellion against the beige years. The turnout exceeded expectations. Not just current residents, but former ones who'd been driven away by Brenda's harassment came back to see the changes. The Nakamuras, who'd been fined into bankruptcy for their Japanese garden, returned to find the community, had created a multicultural garden featuring plants from around the world. They stood there crying, surrounded by neighbors who remembered their story. I manned the grill alongside Mike Chen, flipping burgers and watching the crowd grow. The new residents from Maple Court arrived in clusters, clearly curious about the history they'd stumbled into. Some carried Brenda's brochures, which would soon become very expensive fire starters. Harold's presentation was masterful. He started with the good times, how Willowbrook Estates had been founded on principles of neighborly cooperation. Then came the dark period, illustrated with a PowerPoint that included security footage of Brenda's various meltdowns. The crowd was silent as they watched her scream, "I am the hoe," and throw her clipboard at my head. The new residents exchanged glances, clearly reconsidering their flirtation with hiring her. But the real impact came from the testimonials. One by one, residents stood up to share their stories. The veteran who'd been fined for flying an American flag on Veterans Day, the young mother whose children had been photographed by Brenda as evidence of excessive outdoor play, the elderly couple who'd nearly lost their home over rose bushes that exceeded height regulations by 2 inches. Then Janet took the microphone. "What we have now isn't perfect," she said, her voice carrying across the park. "Sometimes the grass gets a little tall. Sometimes people paint their houses colors that surprise us. Sometimes dogs bark and children play loudly, and life happens in all its messy glory. But that's what makes us a community, not rules and fines and fear, but acceptance and support and the freedom to be ourselves." The applause was thunderous, but the day's biggest surprise was yet to come. As the presentation ended and people began returning to their burgers and conversations, a silver sedan pulled up to the park entrance. Out stepped a woman in a business suit that screamed, "Trying too hard," accompanied by a man with a camera. My stomach tightened as I recognized the unchanged walk, the clipboard clutched like a weapon, the predatory smile of someone who thought they'd found easy prey. Brenda Hutchinson had decided to crash her own exposé. The crowd noticed her immediately. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Parents instinctively moved closer to their children. Dogs that had been playing happily suddenly growled. It was like watching nature itself recognize a threat. But Brenda, oblivious as always to social cues, marched forward with her cameraman in tow. "Good afternoon, Willowbrook Estates," she called out in that artificially sweet voice that had terrorized the community for 7 years. "I understand you're having a community meeting, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to discuss my new consulting services." The silence was deafening. 400 eyes turned to her with expressions ranging from disbelief to barely contained rage. Harold stepped forward, his usually gentle demeanor replaced with steel. "Miss Hutchinson, you are not welcome here. Please leave immediately." But Brenda had come prepared with her own narrative. "I understand there's been some misinformation spread about my previous tenure," she continued, gesturing for her cameraman to keep rolling. "I'm here to set the record straight and offer my expertise to help restore this community to its former glory." That's when 84-year-old Eleanor Moss, 5 feet tall and 90 pounds soaking wet, did what we all wanted to do. She walked straight up to Brenda, looked her in the eye, and said in a voice that could have etched glass, "Young woman, you stole $3,000 from me in fines for having a bird bath that you deemed not architecturally consistent. You made my final years with my husband miserable with your constant harassment. The only glory this community has ever known came after we threw you out like the trash you are." The crowd erupted, not in violence, but in testimony. One after another, residents approached Brenda with their stories. Their voices overlapped in a symphony of accusation. "You fined me for my child's bicycle. You tried to force me to euthanize my emotional support animal. You measured my grass every single day for a month." Brenda's cameraman slowly lowered his equipment, apparently realizing he was filming something very different from the triumphant return his client had promised. Brenda herself began backing away, her practiced smile crumbling as the weight of her legacy crashed down upon her. But the coup de grace came from an unexpected source. A police car pulled into the park, and out stepped Detective James Morrison. He walked through the crowd with purpose, stopping directly in front of Brenda. "Miss Hutchinson," he said formally, "I've just received a call from your probation officer in Florida. Apparently you failed to notify them of your travel outside the state, and your consultation business violates the terms of your plea agreement." Brenda's face went through its familiar color progression, red to purple to that greenish white that had become her signature. "This is harassment," she screeched, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. "I have every right to conduct legitimate business. You people destroyed my life, and now you won't even let me rebuild it. You destroyed your own life," I said, stepping forward from the grill. I'd stayed quiet until now, content to let the community handle their former tormentor, but this needed one final nail in the coffin. "You had power, real power to make people's lives better. Instead, you used it to terrorize families, steal money, and feed your own ego. The fact that you're back here, trying to sell your services to people you abused, shows you've learned nothing." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "By the way, that consulting company of yours? I had some friends in corporate compliance look into it. Turns out you never registered it properly, never got the required licenses. And that address you're using? It's a mail drop at a UPS store, so add business fraud to your growing list of problems." Detective Morrison nodded to his partner, who gently but firmly took Brenda's arm. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. You can sort this out with your probation officer, but you're done here." As they led her away, Brenda turned back one last time. The look in her eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was something worse. Complete incomprehension. She genuinely didn't understand why her victims wouldn't welcome her back with open arms and open wallets. The cameraman she'd hired packed up his equipment and slunk away, probably wondering how he'd explain to his wife why the easy corporate video job had ended with his client in custody. The silver sedan sat abandoned at the park entrance until a tow truck arrived to haul it away. One final reminder of Brenda's spectacular second failure. As the police car disappeared and conversations slowly resumed, Janet climbed onto a picnic table with a beer in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "I'd like to propose a toast to Willowbrook Estates, where we've proven twice now that freedom beats tyranny, neighbors beat dictators, and the only standard we enforce is kindness." The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 towns over, but more importantly, it could be heard by every potential Brenda who might think our community was an easy target. We weren't just free from one tyrant, we were immunized against all future ones. That night, after the grills were cold and the park was cleaned, I found myself once again on my porch with Miranda. We'd opened a bottle of the good wine, the kind you save for either funerals or victories. This felt like both. The final burial of Brenda's influence and the victory of a community that had found its soul. "Think she'll try again?" Miranda asked. Swirling her wine thoughtfully, I considered the question, then shook my head. "Not here. She's burned this bridge, doused it in gasoline, and nuked it from orbit. But somewhere else? Probably. People like her don't change. They just find new hunting grounds. Should we warn other communities?" Miranda pulled out her phone, already scrolling through her contacts. "I've got colleagues all over the country. We could create a kind of early warning system for HOA predators." And that's how the National Registry of HOA Abuses was born, right there on my porch. 2 slightly tipsy friends, deciding that one victory wasn't enough. Within 6 months, the database had logged over 300 cases of HOA overreach. From the petty to the criminal, Brenda's name was entry number 1, complete with photos, documentation, and a warning label that would make toxic waste jealous. Communities started checking the database before hiring consultants or electing board members. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Willowbrook Estates became something of a pilgrimage site for communities struggling with their own HOA tyrants. Delegations would arrive to study what we'd done right, how we'd structured our new bylaws to prevent future Brendas, how we'd built a community based on mutual respect rather than mutual surveillance. Janet started giving talks at property management conferences, spreading the gospel of reasonable governance. The new residents from Maple Court, the ones Brenda had targeted, became some of the most active community members. They organized movie nights in the park, showings of The Now, infamous confrontation video followed by discussions about maintaining vigilance against creeping authoritarianism. It sounds heavy, but they made it fun, with bingo cards for spotting red flags and prizes for the best I am the HOA impressions. 5 more years have passed. Willowbrook Estates has become a case study in several urban planning textbooks, proof that communities can thrive without oppressive oversight. Property values have continued to rise, not despite our freedom but because of it. Turns out, people will pay premium prices to live somewhere they can paint their door any color they want. Brenda Hutchinson's name has become a verb in our community. Don't Brenda me means don't try to impose arbitrary rules. That's such a Brenda move, describes any attempt at petty power grabbing. The children who were toddlers during her reign now use her name as a playground insult, the ultimate sign that her legacy has been reduced to a cautionary tale told to scare young HOA board members straight. I still live on my ranch, still drink coffee on my porch, still keep those horses that Brenda found so offensive. The view hasn't changed much, except for the explosion of color where beige once reigned supreme. Every non-compliant mailbox, every too-tall fence, every garden gnome standing proud in a front yard is a small victory against the forces of suburban conformity. The real victory isn't in her defeat, though that was satisfying. The real victory is in what grew in her absence. A community that laughs more than it legislates, that helps more than it harasses, that understands the difference between maintaining standards and maintaining humanity. We didn't just beat a tyrant, we built something better in the space she left behind.